A few months ago, I uploaded a video on a Reddit user who believed they were being stalked. However, they did admit to stopping taking the bipolar medication, so it seemed like that might explain the situation. I recently came across a post on the Reddit Bureau of Investigation by a totally different Reddit user who also believes they're being stalked, but this one seems a little bit more convincing. Let's investigate. If you enjoy internet mysteries, conspiracies, and true crime, feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications for more content like this. I also have a Patreon and a PayPal, so if you're interested in supporting the channel, feel free to check those out, links will be in the description. User blueblackjupiter titled her post, "Video Proof, Upstairs Neighbour Stalks Me." It read, "Yes, I know what you're thinking. I've had a psychological evaluation, can supply proof to mods. 10-minute compilation video, 90 plus pages of time-stamped incidents, and my carbon monoxide detector works fine. Background: me, single, black, female from the US. Her, single, white, female from Ireland." I can't even begin to describe how unbelievable and frightening this situation is. It started shortly after I moved into my apartment on September the 1st, 2020. My therapist picked up on the fact I seemed uneasy and asked if I felt safe. At the time, I hadn't tuned into my surroundings much, but realised she was right and I hadn't been relaxing. I'd soon learn why. Inexplicably, my neighbour above would follow me from room to room and hover over me. For example, if I'm in my bedroom, she will already be in the room above it. If I get up to go to my kitchen, she will tail behind seconds after. If I go to my room, she will do the same, sometimes stomping. She's literally my shadow. For the first few months, she did this nearly every single time I got up to do something, even during more intimate moments, like taking a shower or using the bathroom. Dumbfounded, I asked friends if they'd ever been able to hear their downstairs neighbours. I've never heard them in past places and can't hear those below me now. I took detailed notes for a week before realising things weren't a coincidence. The first person I told was my therapist. She encouraged me to seek out an evaluation, and I did. Not having had a history of such illnesses, I never doubted my observations, but still wanted to rule out the onset of something like schizophrenia. I'm fine in that regard. It sounds crazy, but for the longest time, I've suspected there might be hidden cameras in my apartment. There have been too many things I've done that she's reacted to that wouldn't be possible without seeing me. And honestly, hidden camera crimes will become more frequent once people realise how easy they are to get on sites like Amazon. They're already an issue in places like South Korea. Why I think there's more to this. She never ever leaves her apartment and until May never appeared to have any visitors. Those visitors were some of the tenants on my floor. They moved out last weekish. When I complained to the landlord in October, kept it vague to not seem insane, he told me maintenance was never able to get into her unit. He also said 2 people lived there and that one was unemployed. Said he would talk to her in person, which I didn't get as we were still in lockdown. Landlord then went MIA and hired property management. Her roommate secretly moved out last year. All the tenants on her floor moved out by June. All units in the building are on September leases with the exception of one. One of the tenants on her floor had a roommate who appeared to move out during the middle of the year. Someone left a bottle of bleach square on my doormat, see image. This has racist connotations and bleach/acid attacks are not uncommon in Europe. I suspect she might have done it. I cannot hear the tenants below me and I could barely hear those next to me before they moved out. The only sounds I really hear from my upstairs neighbour are her stomping, smoke alarm, and when she first turns on her shower. This isn't an insulation problem. Never got a signed copy of the lease. This has caused me a significant amount of fear and exacerbated my medical issues. I've lost months of work and have spent nearly a quarter of my lease living with friends. I live very much in fear that this person could harm me, as they are fixated on me 24/7 and never ever leave their apartment. This is an extremely strange situation, and given how folks in my periphery have behaved, I believe someone knows something. I can't keep quiet about this any longer, in fear she might do this to someone else. I'm hoping that by sharing this story, the community might be able to help me with the following. Identify places where cameras hide, detecting different types of cameras, Wi-Fi enabled, SD card based, etc. Any help with this would be so appreciated. Thank you for your time. So, there's a lot to unpack there. First of all, it's great that OP had a psychological evaluation. It's entirely possible that an undiagnosed or an unmanaged mental illness could cause paranoia and ultimately make a person feel like they might be being stalked when they're actually not. Similarly, we've all heard the story of the Reddit user who thought the landlord was coming into their apartment and leaving post-it notes, but it actually turned out that they were writing the notes themselves and they just didn't remember due to carbon monoxide exposure. OP says her carbon monoxide detector works, and while a psychological evaluation isn't infallible, we don't have much reason to doubt her mental state. There were a couple of things pointed out by other users that made them question her mental state, such as her wearing a mask inside, but she said that she'd literally just got in and just hadn't taken it off yet, and most other things people highlighted were a little bit nitpicky. I do think there are signs that OP is paranoid, such as believing that many other people are involved, but I don't think that means that she has no reason to be worried about the behaviour of her neighbour. She provides video evidence to back up her claims, a 10-minute compilation of clips showing her walking around her apartment. It's not totally conclusive, but it does sound like there are footsteps above her following her. Some people still weren't totally convinced by that though, and suggested that the noises might actually be pipes. One comment read, "Some thoughts. Could the stomping noise be coming from pipes? Isn't it a thing that people think their house is haunted because they hear footsteps, but it's really pipes?" In the video, it says that the upstairs neighbour loves to stomp around when you use the sink or shower, which further makes me think the noise is coming from the pipes and not a human. Also, it doesn't make sense why she would purposely stomp when your hearing is impaired by running water. In addition to the stomping correlating with you using the sink or shower, there's also the weird thing where it's like the same time every night, there's a loud repetitive stomping noise that is unrelated to you. It reminded me of a water pump. I think it's possible that it could be your neighbour, but I think this might be a thing to rule out first. That would sound like quite a plausible theory if it weren't for the other strange details, such as the fact that when OP left her apartment, the noises totally stopped, even though a friend was still in and walking around. She also mentioned in a comment that sometimes when she gets her phone out to start recording, the noises stop. Those two details, if consistent enough to not be pure coincidence, mean it's almost undoubtable that the neighbour is watching OP, either using a camera or through holes in the ceiling and the floors. It'd be creepy enough if the person in the apartment above you listened to your footsteps and used that to follow you around your apartment from their apartment, but the thought of them literally being able to watch OP's every move is so much more frightening. OP has posted a few updates, one describing what happened when her friend came round. "When my friend was setting up her computer in the morning, my neighbour came above us briefly before walking away. When I left my apartment for a little over an hour, my friend said she came above her, stomped for a bit, then stayed mostly silent. She didn't follow my friend around, but my friend said that she was mostly at her desk and didn't really walk around. When I returned to my apartment, I took a shower. My friend and I heard my neighbour above, near my bathroom, as she stomped periodically throughout the shower. She's above me in my bedroom as I type this." That seems to further suggest that the neighbour is watching OP, as she seems to know that OP had left the apartment rather than the friend. They both searched around for any hidden cameras, removing light fixtures, checking outlets, small crevices and holes in the wall. They found nothing, but as of the last update, plan to do one final search in case they missed anything. One Reddit user noticed that in the video, there appears to be some infrared light in the kitchen, and OP clarifies that the lights are from security cameras she set up last year. A few weeks ago, the Wi-Fi cut out, and when it came back on, the cameras wouldn't reconnect no matter what she did. As others have said, that could absolutely be the smoking gun. Perhaps the neighbour hacked into the cameras and is watching OP through them. It sounds like this issue existed before the cameras broke, but I wonder if the neighbour's behaviour has changed or gotten worse since then. At one point, OP took the neighbour to court with hopes of obtaining a harassment prevention order. She described her first face-to-face interaction with the neighbour shortly before. Back in November, I went up to her floor asking why she'd been stomping deliberately all the time. I was going through a lot and just wanted this to stop, so I bluntly asked. I only confronted her so that I could match her face with the one I saw on social media profiles to make sure I had the right person. At first she denied it, but when I told her she'd be getting a letter in the mail, she immediately went quiet. When I went downstairs to my unit, she stomped above me once very loudly and didn't bug me for the rest of the day. The next day or so, she left her apartment and didn't seem to return until a few days after the hearing. The judge denied the harassment prevention order I sought for 2 reasons. Didn't have video evidence at the time. I couldn't prove a motive. She tried to pin it on her roommate, who had actually secretly moved out. Stalker claimed she worked at work while roommate worked from home. Wasn't true. That's a pretty big red flag right there. If totally out of the blue you were accused by your neighbour of following them around their apartment from your apartment and you really weren't doing that, you'd probably be really surprised and taken aback at the bizarre nature of the claim. But the neighbour didn't even seem shocked and didn't even deny knowledge of it happening, just blamed it on the roommate instead. If the noises were the pipes, as some suggested, not only would the neighbour totally deny what she was accused of, but there's a good chance that she'd be experiencing the same problem, so she'd at least offer that as an explanation. Either way, that's a very telling reaction, and I wonder if OP could take her back to court now she has a little bit more evidence. It sounds like the neighbour's strange behaviour began when OP moved in, she just didn't realise for a while at first. Well, there is every chance that the neighbour did this with the previous tenants too, and maybe that's why they moved out. I don't know if there's any way for OP to find out who the previous tenants were, but if that was possible, it could indicate whether or not the neighbour is just an odd person who would do this to anyone, or whether she's targeting OP specifically. Anyway, OP states that the person living with the neighbour moved out last year. She kind of implies that they were still living there when she moved in, but I don't know for sure. I wonder if that person who moved out had anything to do with the neighbour's behaviour. A still creepy but less nefarious explanation for all this is that the neighbour just got really lonely when their roommate moved out and just became somewhat of a recluse. Maybe they tried to have some connection with OP because they were the only person that they had any level of contact with, even if OP didn't reciprocate. Maybe she clung on to that tiny fragment of perceived human connection and just got a little bit obsessed. Who knows? There is a darker possibility though, which OP hints at more than once, that the neighbour might actually be racist, and that could be why she's targeting OP. The part in the post that says, "Given how folks in my periphery have behaved, I believe someone knows something," really gave me Get Out vibes, like everyone but OP knows what's going on. But for the most part, that just seems to be a gut feeling with not much evidence, so while I absolutely consider that a possibility, it's hard to say for sure. I'm not for a second trying to invalidate OP's thoughts and feelings about the situation. She knows it much better than we do, but if she has experienced racism before, there's a chance she'd be more likely to assume that her race is why she's being targeted by the neighbour, when perhaps the neighbour would be acting like this with anyone else. We just don't know for sure. What I'm getting at is, there's a chance OP was targeted specifically, but there's also a chance that anyone who moved in would have been treated the same, and that previous tenants were too. OP shared a photo showing a bottle of bleach that had been left at her door, and noted that it has racist connotations. We can rule out the possibility that it was dropped out of a rubbish bag when someone was taking the bin out or something. As OP said, you'd have to go out of your way to get to her door, so I'm inclined to believe it was probably left by the neighbour. In which case, bleach is quite a specific thing to leave on someone's doorstep, so OP's suspicions could well be correct. That could provide a possible motive. Maybe the neighbour is trying to scare OP into moving out. The fact that she hasn't physically harmed OP, yet at least, is somewhat reassuring and suggests that she might just be trying to intimidate. The neighbour doesn't appear to be hiding what she's doing, and if anything seems to want OP to know that she's there, loudly stomping at times. Just because things haven't escalated to a physical assault yet, doesn't mean they won't though. As for now, what's so scary about this situation is that something seems to be going on, but it's just not that direct. It's like the neighbour wants to intimidate OP, but not enough to the point where there'll be evidence for it. It's just on the line where you could probably quite easily convince yourself that you're going crazy and that it's just all in your head. We haven't even discussed some of the more speculative reasons OP gave for being suspicious about the situation, some of which are very odd. It sounds like the landlord initially cooperated with OP and didn't really seem to know what was going on with the neighbour. He said maintenance was never able to get into her apartment, and I assume he just didn't really care about that for whatever reason. Maybe he's only bothered about the tenants paying rent, and that could explain why he seemingly vanished after OP spoke to him, because he just wanted his rent paid and wasn't bothered for the hassle of any drama. Then there's a possibility that other tenants in the building know what's going on with the neighbour and just haven't told OP. That's partly due to OP's gut feeling, but there are other details which might suggest that too. The only visitors she's aware of the neighbour having is a couple of tenants that recently moved out of her floor. If they visited her, that could suggest that they were friendly, so could they have been involved? It seems like a lot of people have moved out of that building recently, as by June, all apartments on the neighbour's floor were vacated, despite the leases being until September. Apart from the people who visited her, it makes more sense that if the other tenants do know anything, that they've probably experienced the same behaviour from the neighbour too. At least that's easier to believe than some huge conspiracy involving everyone in the building apart from OP. The fact that all the tenants on the neighbour's floor moved out seriously suggests that they had an issue with her too, but I wonder why no one's told OP about it if there is something seriously wrong. Whatever is going on, it seems unlikely that the landlord would be involved in it because it's literally losing him tenants at this point. But then why wouldn't he put a stop to it? At this rate, the neighbour is going to be the only one left in the building, so it makes no sense whatsoever that the landlord wouldn't intervene. And that's just one of the many ways that this situation is so bizarre. It's not hard to let your mind run wild based on these odd details, but without more information, it's hard to say for sure. I don't know exactly what or how nefarious it might be, but I really feel like something is going on here, and I think OP needs to get the hell out of there. Obviously we only have OP's side of the story, perhaps it'd be a totally different story from the neighbour's perspective. I do believe that OP is paranoid, and I think that might make her see certain details as relevant when they aren't, but the picture that I'm forming is that the neighbour was behaving strange, and that over the months this has caused OP to become increasingly paranoid. And that's totally understandable. I don't know anyone who could go through something like this without being affected psychologically. But it is impossible to know if the paranoia has caused OP to feel like this, or what is going on has caused the paranoia. Even if the neighbour's behaviour has been misinterpreted and she actually means no harm, it must be such a stressful situation for OP, and I think she'd be better on a mate's sofa than the situation she's in now. A few kind Redditors offered to chip in and help OP get out of the situation, or at least pay for a private investigator to investigate the neighbour fully. Last I saw, she hadn't taken them up on that offer, but it is really refreshing to see people helping out total strangers on the internet. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments. Do you think OP really is being stalked by her neighbour, or do you think it's all in her head? If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Huge thank you to my patrons whose names are on screen now. I really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on Thursday for a new video.